The mortarboard hit the ground at my feet, and my son's voice cut through the celebration like broken glass. "Thanks for nothing, Dad. You're a failure." Michael didn't whisper it, didn't try to hide it from the family streaming past us on the university lawn. He said it loud enough for the couple next to us to stop mid-conversation, their smiles freezing as they pretended not to hear. The woman clutched her, pearls literally clutched. The man steered her husband toward the parking lot like we carried some contagious disease. I stood there holding a bouquet of yellow roses, watching my 22-year-old son adjust his graduation gown like he hadn't just gutted me in front of 300 strangers. The June sun beat down on my shoulders, and sweat started collecting under the collar of my best shirt, the white boot I'd ironed 3 times that morning because I wanted everything perfect for his day. "Michael," I started. "Don't." He held up his hand without looking at me, his class ring catching the light. The ring I'd saved for 6 months to buy him junior year. "I'm done pretending this means something to you." The words landed like physical blows. Around us, other families celebrated. A grandfather lifted his granddaughter onto his shoulders while she waved her diploma. A mother snapped photos of her son with his fraternity brothers, all of them grinning like they'd conquered the world. Normal families doing normal things. I wasn't part of that world. Not anymore. Emma, his girlfriend since sophomore year, touched his elbow gently. "Michael, maybe we should go." He shrugged away from her touch. That casual cruelty he'd perfected over the past 3 years. "I've got dinner plans with people who actually matter." The roses felt heavy in my hands. I'd picked them up at dawn from Helen's flower shop, the same place I'd bought Sarah's wedding bouquet 25 years ago. Yellow roses were Michael's favorite when he was little. He used to help me plant them in the backyard, his small hands covered in dirt, chattering about everything and nothing while we worked. That boy was gone, had been gone for a long time. "Your mother would have been proud," I said quietly. Michael's jaw tightened. For a second something flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold indifference I'd learned to expect. "Don't." His voice was flat. "Don't bring her into this." He turned to Emma, who was staring at her shoes like she wanted to disappear. "Ready?" She nodded, without meeting my eyes. They walked away together, Michael's graduation gown flowing behind him like some medieval prince dismissing a peasant. I watched them disappear into the crowd of graduates and families, my son's dark hair catching the sunlight until I couldn't see him anymore. My phone buzzed, a text from my sister Janet. "How's our college graduate? Send pictures." I stared at the screen until it went black, then slipped it back into my pocket. The walk to my truck felt like miles. Families loaded up their cars with flowers and balloons, everyone rushing off to celebration dinners and parties. I moved through them like smoke, invisible and unwanted. A few people from town nodded politely. Mrs. Henderson from the post office, Bob Martinez who ran the hardware store, but their smiles were careful, the kind you give someone whose business you want, but whose personal life you'd rather not discuss. Everyone knew Sarah had died. Everyone knew. I'd raised Michael alone, and now everyone had seen him call me a failure on the most important day of his life. My Ford F-150 sat in the back corner of the lot, rust spots showing through the blue paint like age spots on an old man's hands. I'd driven this truck for 12 years, kept it running with duct tape and determination because every spare dollar went to Michael's education. While his classmates drove BMWs and Audis their parents bought them, Michael rode the bus or caught rides with friends. Apparently, that made me a failure too. I unlocked the door and set the roses on the passenger seats, then sat there in the heat with the windows down. The leather was cracked and patched with electrical tape. The radio hadn't worked in 3 years, but it was mine, bought and paid for, and it had never once failed to get me where I needed to go. Unlike me, apparently, my hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel. 63 years old, and I was falling apart in a parking lot like some broken-down machine. The tears came without warning, hot and embarrassing and impossible to stop. I thought about that morning 12 years ago when I'd driven Michael to his first day of middle school. He'd been nervous, picking at his backpack straps and asking if I thought the other kids would like him. I'd told him they'd be crazy not to. Told him he was smart and funny and kind, that any friend would be lucky to have him. He'd hugged me before getting out of the truck. Actually, hugged me right there in front of the school, not caring who saw. "Thanks, Dad," he'd said, "for everything." When had that boy become this stranger? When had love turned into resentment? Gratitude into contempt? I knew when. It started the day Michael got his first student loan statement junior year. $86,000 in debt, with law school still ahead of him. He'd brought the letter to my kitchen table, slapped it down next to my coffee cup, and asked how I'd let this happen. I worked every overtime shift available, I'd told him. Sold your mother's jewelry, used up the college fund. It wasn't enough, he'd said. Look at the Hendersons. Look at the Pratts. Their kids graduated debt-free. Their kids also didn't get into law school in Northwestern. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I should have aimed lower. Maybe I should have gone to community college like you did. The way he'd said it, community college was some kind of disease. The 2 years I'd spent there, while working full-time to support my family, was something shameful. That's when I knew I'd lost him. That was 3 years ago. 3 years of watching my son turn into someone I didn't recognize. Someone who saw my sacrifices as failures, my love as inadequacy. A horn honked behind me. The parking lot was emptying out. Families heading home or to restaurants to continue their celebrations. I started the truck and pulled out slowly, driving past the campus where I'd attended every parent weekend. Every football game, every awards ceremony where Micah's name was called. The radio might not work, but I could still hear the silence loud and clear. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my laptop, staring at the screen that would change everything. My retirement account balance, $127,000. 35 years of careful saving, every penny accounted for. Michael's debt, $80,000. I knew what I had to do. The question was whether I was fool enough to do it. But first, I had to find out exactly who my son had become. The first thing I found was the Instagram account. I'd never been much for social media, still thought of it as something for teenagers butt-sitting. In my kitchen at 2 in the morning, I figured it was time to learn. Michael's profile wasn't private. Why would it be? He had nothing to hide from the world. Apparently, just from me. The photos loaded slowly on my ancient laptop, each one a small punch to the gut. There was Michael at some rooftop party, arm around Emma, both of them laughing at something off. The city's skyline glittered behind them like diamonds. Another photo showed him at what looked like an expensive restaurant, holding up a glass of wine that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. I scrolled further. Michael skiing in Colorado over winter break. Michael at a baseball game in box seats. Michael and Emma at what the caption called Emma's Family Lake House, a sprawling mansion that made my little ranch house look like a tool shed. Each photo had dozens of comments. Goals. Living your best life. So jealous. I kept scrolling until I found what I was looking for. A post from last month, right around the time Michael had told me about his debt. The photo showed him, and 3 other guys at some upscale bar, all of them in expensive suits, raising glasses of what looked like whiskey. The caption read, "When your trust fund friends understand the struggle is real. Hashtag broke but not broken. Lao Shabong. Hashtag grateful for my tribe. Trust fund friend." I stared at those words until they burned into my retinas. My son was embarrassed by his lack of money, but not enough to stop spending it. Not enough to skip the ski trips and fancy dinners and whatever else he did with Emma's family money. I clicked on Emma's profile next. Her father owned 3 car dealerships and a construction company. Her mother was some kind of interior designer for rich people. The family photos showed a life I couldn't even imagine. European vacation, yachts, horses. No wonder Michael looked at me like I was a disappointment. Compared to Emma's family, I was nothing. A community college graduate who fixed air conditioners for a living, driving a rust bucket truck, and living in the same house I'd bought with Sarah 25 years ago. I closed the laptop and walked to the refrigerator, pulling out a beer. The kitchen felt smaller than usual, cramped and outdated. The linoleum was curling at the edges, and the cabinets needed painting. I'd been meaning to fix both for years, but there was always something more important. Michael's textbooks, Michael's dorm fees, Michael's future. The beer tasted bitter. Or maybe that was just me. My phone rang at 6:30 the next morning. I was already awake. Had been 4 hours. Sitting on the back porch, watching the sun come up over the neighbors' houses. The number on the screen made my stomach clench. "Mr. Patterson, this is Jennifer Walls from First National Bank." I knew Jennifer. Had worked with her when I took out the home equity loan to help pay for Michael's sophomore year. She had that careful, professional voice people used when they were about to deliver bad news. "What can I do for you, Jennifer? I'm calling about your son, Michael. He listed you as his emergency contact on his student loan applications." My blood went cold. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, exactly, but he's behind on his payments. 3 months behind. Actually, the loans are about to go into default." I set my coffee cup down so hard it cracked against the porch railing. "How behind?" $12,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. Michael had been lying to me, not just about the Instagram posts and the fancy dinners, but about everything. While I'd been feeling guilty about his debt, he'd been defaulting on his loans and letting them pile up like dirty laundry. "Mr. Patterson, are you there?" "I'm here." My voice sounded strange, even to me. "What happens if he defaults?" "His credit will be destroyed. He won't be able to get loans for law school. And since you co-signed some of these loans, ... double quotes, she didn't need to finish. My credit would be destroyed too. The retirement I'd been planning, the small house in Florida I'd been dreaming about, all of it would disappear. How long do I have?" 10 days before we start the default process." After I hung up, I sat there staring at my phone like it had grown teeth. 3 months behind, $12,000. And Michael hadn't said a word. I called him that afternoon. It went straight to voicemail, the same generic message he'd been using since college. "You've reached Michael Patterson. Leave a message. Michael, it's your father. Call me back. We need to talk." He didn't call back. I tried again that evening. Same result. The third time, around 9 o'clock, Emma answered. "Mr. Patterson, Michael's in the shower. Tell him it's about his student loans." There was a long pause. I could hear music in the background, voices, laughter. They were at another party, another celebration I wasn't invited to. "He'll call you back," Emma said, but her voice was uncertain. "When?" "I'll make sure he gets the message." The line went dead. That night, I drove to Michael's apartment for the first time in 2 years. He lived in one of those new complexes near campus, all glass and steel and modern fixtures. The kind of place that charged extra for parking and had a doorman who looked at you like you didn't belong. The doorman, kid young enough to be my grandson, stopped me at the front desk. "I'm here to see Michael Patterson," I said. "Is he expecting you?" "I'm his father." The kid looked me up and down, taking in my work boots and faded jeans, the grease stain on my shirt from fixing Mrs. Chune's air conditioner that afternoon. "I'll need to call her." He dialed Michael's number, waited, then hung up. No answer. "Sorry." Through the lobby's floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see Michael's car in the parking garage. A Honda Civic that was nicer than anything I'd ever owned, but still modest compared to the BMWs and Mercedes surrounding it. He was home. He just didn't want to see me. I stood there for a moment, looking up at the building where my son lived, wondering if he was watching me from his window, wondering if he felt anything at all. The drive home took forever. Every red light, every stop sign felt like the universe was forcing me to sit with my thoughts, to really understand what was happening. My son wasn't just ungrateful. He wasn't just embarrassed by me. He was using me. Back home, I opened my laptop again and pulled up my banking account. The numbers hadn't changed. $127,000 in retirement savings. Enough to clear Michael's debt and give him a fresh start. Enough to ensure he could go to law school, build the life he wanted, never have to worry about money again. All I had to do was transfer the money, click a few buttons, and solve all his problems. But as I stared at the screen, something else was bothering me. Something beyond the debt and the lies and the way he treated me at graduation. I opened a new browser window and typed in Northwestern Law School tuition. What I found there changed everything I thought I knew about my son's future. Northwestern Law School costs $68,000 a year. I stared at the number on my screen, reading it 3 times to make sure I wasn't making a mistake. Tuition, fees, living expenses, total came to over $200,000 for 3 years. Even with the partial scholarship Michael had mentioned, he'd need at least $150,000 in additional loans, but that wasn't what made my hands start shaking. According to Northwestern's website, enrollment deposits were due months ago. Students who'd been accepted would have received their financial aid packages by February. It was now late June, and law school started in August. I clicked through page after page, looking for some explanation, some loophole I was missing. But the facts were clear. If Michael was really starting Northwestern in the fall, he should have been neck-deep in paperwork and loan applications by now. Instead, he was throwing parties and posting Instagram photos like he didn't have a care in the world. My phone rang. For a split second, I hoped it was Michael finally calling me back. Instead, it was Frank Kowalski, my supervisor at Precision Air. "Jim, I know it's late, but Mrs. Rodriguez's AC unit just died. She's got her granddaughter visiting, and the poor kid has asthma. Can you swing by?" Of course. I closed the laptop and grabbed my tool bag. Mrs. Rodriguez had been a customer for 15 years, ever since her husband died and left her alone in that little house on Maple Street. She always paid on time and never complained about my rates, unlike some people. The drive to Mrs. Rodriguez's house took me through the old part of town where the houses were small and practical, built by people who understood the value of a dollar. The lawns were neat but not perfect. The cars were older but well-maintained. These were my people, hard-working folks who didn't have trust funds or family lake houses, who fixed things when they broke instead of throwing them away. Mrs. Rodriguez met me at the door, her gray hair wrapped in a colorful scarf, worry lines creasing her forehead. "Jim, thank you for coming so late. Little Sophia, she can barely breathe in this heat. I could hear the child coughing from somewhere inside the house. Let me take a look. The AC unit was ancient, probably installed when the house was built in the 70s. The compressor had finally given up, but I had a used one in my truck that would work until she could afford a replacement. As I worked, Mrs. Rodriguez brought me a glass of iced tea and sat on her back steps, watching me with the patient attention of someone who'd learned to appreciate competent work. "How's your boy doing?" she asked. "I heard he graduated from college." "He did." I kept my voice neutral, focusing on the wiring. "You must be so proud. Not many kids from this neighborhood make it through college." I thought about Michael's Instagram posts, his expensive dinners, his trust fund friends. "No, not many. My grandson, he's thinking about college, but the cost. Dot." She shook her head. I tell him, maybe community college first, then transfer, like you did, like I did. Mrs. Rodriguez remembered when I was 25, working days and going to school nights. Sarah pregnant with Michael, and both of us living in a one-bedroom apartment that wasn't much bigger than a closet. She'd been our neighbor then, had watched me leave for work before dawn and come home after dark, books tucked under my arm, determination written across my face. "Community college isn't shameful," I said, tightening a connection. "It's smart. Tell that to these kids today. They all want the fancy schools, the big names." She sipped her tea. "But you know what? The best man I ever knew, my husband, God rest his soul, never went to college at all. Learned everything he needed to know with his hands. Me, like my father before me, like most of the men in this neighborhood, who built lives and raised families without apology, who measured success in simpler terms than Instagram likes and trust fund connections." The AC unit hummed to life, cold air flowing through the vents. Inside the house, Sophia's coughing subsided. "How much do I owe you?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked. "Parts and labor, $60. She pressed 4 20s into my hand. "Keep the change. For coming out so late, I tried to give back the extra 20, but she waved me off." "For Michael's college fund?" she said, with a smile that made my throat tight. "Even college graduates need help sometimes." If she only knew. Back home, I sat in my truck in the driveway for a long time, thinking about Mrs. Rodriguez and her grandson, about the difference between wanting an education and wanting the appearance of success. Michael had always been smart in a role every semester. Academic scholarships, teachers calling to tell me how gifted he was. But somewhere along the way, intelligence had turned into entitlement. Or maybe I'd just been too blind to see it. I went inside and opened the laptop again, this time searching for something specific. Northwestern Law School's enrolled students directory. It took some digging, but I found what I was looking for: database of current and incoming students that was accessible to the public for networking purposes. I searched for Michael Patterson. Nothing. I tried different spellings, different combinations. Still nothing. Then I searched the entire database for Patterson, just to be sure. There were 3 Pattersons listed. None of them were Michael. My son wasn't enrolled at Northwestern Law School. Maybe he'd never even applied. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what I was discovering. The lies were piling up like snowflakes in a blizzard of debt. The missed payments, the law school that didn't exist. What else had Michael been lying about? More importantly, what was he planning to do with the money he thought I'd give him? My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, I thought it might be Michael, but it was from Emma. "Mr. Patterson, I'm sorry about graduation. Michael feels bad about what he said. Maybe you two could talk soon." I stared at the message for several minutes before typing back. Tell him to call me. We definitely need to talk. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I'll make sure he does. But he didn't call. Not that night, not the next day. By Thursday, the silence was driving me crazy. I tried his number again and got the same voicemail. This time, I left a different message. Michael, I know about Northwestern. I know about the loan payments. Call me back, or I'm coming to your apartment. An hour later, my phone rang. Dad. His voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. Yes, we do. Not over the phone. Meet me at Denny's on Route 9. 1 hour. Michael, 1 hour. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. After 3 days of silence, Michael was finally ready to talk. The question was I ready to hear what he had to say? Because something told me the lies I'd uncovered were just the beginning. Denny's at 3 in the afternoon was like a ghost town ghost. A few truckers nursing, coffee, and a tired-looking waitress who'd probably been there since the morning shift. Michael was already sitting in a corner booth when I arrived, his back to the wall, like he was expecting trouble. He looked different, older somehow. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usually perfect hair was disheveled. His hands wrapped around a coffee cup like he was trying to absorb its warmth, even though the June heat made the restaurant's air conditioning work overtime. I slid into the booth across from him, and for a moment neither of us spoke. The waitress appeared with a coffee pot and a questioning look. Coffee, hun, please. I watched her fill my cup, buying time, trying to figure out how to start this conversation. Michael waited until she was gone before he spoke. You've been checking up on me. It wasn't a question. Someone had to, since you weren't returning my calls. He laughed. But there was no humor in it, right? Because calling me back would have solved everything. Michael, what the hell is going on? The words came out harder than I'd intended, but I was past caring about his feelings. The loan payments, Northwestern, all of it. Start talking. He stared into his coffee, like it held the answers to life's mysteries. Outside, traffic hummed past on Route 9, normal people going about their normal lives, while my world cracked apart one revelation at a time. "I didn't get into Northwestern," he said, finally. The admission hung between us like smoke. I'd known it was coming, but hearing him say it still hit like a physical blow. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was going to fix it. He looked up then, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Raw, unfiltered panic. I was going to take a gap year, work on my applications, get in somewhere better. Michael, Northwestern is one of the top law schools in the country. It's not Harvard. The words came out like a confession. It's not Yale. Emma's dad knows people at Harvard. He was going to make some calls, but I needed time. Emma's dad, of course. So you lied to me about getting in? I didn't lie. I just let you believe what you wanted to believe. The distinction was so fine it was meaningless, but Michael clung to it like a life preserver. I took a sip of coffee, trying to process this. My son had built an entire fantasy around a law school admission that didn't exist, all to impress his girlfriend's family. What about the money, Michael? The $80,000 in debt. His jaw tightened. That's real. And the fact that you're 3 months behind on payments? How did you? He stopped himself, shaking his head. Of course, they called you. You co-signed everything. $12,000, Michael. You're about to default, and you didn't think to mention that. I was handling it, by ignoring it, by finding another way. His voice rose slightly, then dropped back down when he noticed the truckers looking our way. Emma's family. They understand what it's like to need help. Her dad was going to talk to some people, maybe find me an internship that paid well enough to catch up on the loans. Every word made it worse. My son wasn't just lying to me, he was lying to himself, building castles in the air while his real life crumbled around him. And in the meantime, I asked, while you're waiting for Emma's dad to solve all your problems, I figured you'd help. He said it so matter-of-factly. My money was his birthright. You always do. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. After everything, the graduation speech, the ignored phone calls, the months of treating me like an embarrassment, he still expected me to bail him out. After what you said at graduation, I kept my voice level, but my hands were shaking. After calling me a failure in front of half the town, Michael had to look uncomfortable. I was stressed. You don't understand the pressure. Don't. I set my coffee cup down harder than necessary. Don't you dare tell me I don't understand pressure. I've been working overtime for 4 years to help pay for your education. I sold your mother's engagement ring to cover your sophomore year dorm fees. I haven't taken a vacation since you started college. I never asked you to do any of that. The words hit me like a slap. You're right. You never asked. Because you never had to. Because I loved you enough to do it anyway. Loved, past tense. The word hung between us, and I saw Michael register it. Dad. I know about the Instagram posts. I continued. The ski trips, the fancy dinners, the rooftop parties. While you're telling me you're drowning in debt, you're posting pictures of yourself living like a trust fund kid. Michael's face flushed. Those were special occasions. Emma's family invited me. Emma's family. I leaned forward. Let me guess. They don't know about the debt, do they? They think you're just another college graduate with a bright future ahead of him. The silence was answer enough. You're ashamed of me, I said quietly. Ashamed of where you came from. Ashamed of what I do for a living. Ashamed that your dad fixes air conditioners instead of owning car dealerships. That's not it. It's exactly that. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo from his Instagram. The one of him and his trust fund friends at the upscale bar. Broke, but not broken. That's what you wrote. Poverty is some kind of joke. Michael stared at the photo, his face cycling through emotions. I couldn't read. You want to know what broke looks like? I continued. It's working 16-hour days in 100-degree heat. Because your son needs textbooks. It's eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner because your son's meal plan costs more than your mortgage payment. It's watching other fathers talk about their retirement plans while you empty your savings account for the 5th time in 4 years. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. It was easier to pretend your problems were bigger than everyone else's. Easier to blame me for not giving you enough instead of being grateful for what you had. The waitress appeared again, refilling our cups with practiced efficiency. She could probably sense the tension, but she'd seen enough family drama in this place to know when to stay invisible. After she left, Michael finally spoke. What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry, that I screwed up. I want you to tell me the truth, all of it. I leaned back, studying his face. What's really going on, Michael? Because this isn't just about law school or student loans. This is about something bigger. He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, just when I was about to press him again, he said something that made my blood freeze. Emma Spregnu. The words hit me like a freight train. He sat there, staring at my son, trying to process what he'd just told me. How pregnant. 4 months. His voice was barely above a whisper. We found out right before graduation. For months, right around the time he'd started missing loan payments, right around the time the lies had started piling up. Does her family know? Not yet. We were waiting for the right time. The right time, as if there was ever a right time to tell your wealthy, conservative future-in-laws that their daughter was pregnant by a broke college graduate with a mountain of debt and no prospects. That's why you need the money, I said, understanding flooding through me. Not for law school. For the baby? Michael nodded miserably. Emma wants to keep it. Her family, they'll cut her off. If they find out she's pregnant and unmarried, but if I can get caught up on the loans, if I can find a decent job, maybe we can make it work. And you thought lying about law school would buy you time? I thought I could figure something out. I thought maybe if I could get Emma's dad to invest in me, help me get started somewhere. Bull quotes. The desperation in his voice was painful to hear. My brilliant, accomplished son was drowning, and instead of asking for help, he'd been lying to everyone, including himself. But there was still something that didn't add up. Something about the timeline, about the way he'd been treating me, about the careful construction of lies he'd built around his life. Michael, I said slowly, if Emma's 4 months pregnant, that means she got pregnant in February. Yes. So you called me in March to tell me about your law school acceptance. You'd already known about the baby for a month. The color drained from his face, which means, I continued, the pieces clicking into place. You weren't just lying about law school to buy time. You were planning something else entirely. Because the truth I was beginning to see was so much worse than anything I'd imagined. The truth hit me like ice water in my veins, and suddenly everything made a terrible kind of sense. You planned this. The words came out quiet, deadly. All of it. The law school lie, the missed payments, even the graduation speech. You planned to take my money from the beginning. Michael's face went white. Dad. I held up my hand, my voice harder than I'd ever heard it. Don't lie to me anymore. I'm done with your lies. The coffee shops seemed to shrink around us. The truckers at the counter, the tired waitress, the hum of the air conditioning, everything faded into background noise as I stared at my son and saw him clearly for the first time in years. You found out Emma was pregnant in February, I continued, my mind racing through the timeline. That's when you started planning. You knew her family would cut her off. Knew you needed money fast. So you invented the Northwestern acceptance to give yourself a reason to ask for help. It was exactly like that. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table. You called me in March, didn't you? All excited about getting into law school, knowing I'd be proud, knowing I'd want to help. You played me perfectly. Michael's silence was confirmation enough. The 80,000 in debt, that was Heiau. But you weren't planning to use my money to pay it off, were you? You were going to tell me you needed living expenses for law school, maybe a down payment on an apartment near campus, something that would give you access to more cash. Dad, please. How much were you going to ask for? 20, 50. All of it. His jaw worked silently, like a fish gasping for air. All of it, I said, answering my own question. You were going to clean me out completely. The waitress appeared again, checking on us with the practiced instincts of someone who'd seen too many family fights. Everything okay here? Fine, I said, without taking my eyes off Michael. Just fine. She retreated, leaving us alone with the weight of what I'd just uncovered. You want to know the really sick part? I continued. I would have given it to you if you'd just been honest. If you'd told me about Emma and the baby and how scared you were, I would have emptied my retirement account without a second thought. I know. Michael's voice was barely audible, but that wasn't enough. was it? You couldn't stand the idea of coming to your failure of a father and admitting you needed help. Was easier to steal from me than to respect me enough to tell the truth. I wasn't stealing. What would you call it? My voice rose slightly, then dropped back down. Taking money under false pretenses. That's fraud, Michael. That's a felony. The word hung between us like a loaded gun. Michael flinched as if I'd hit him. You want to be a lawyer? I continued. What do you think the Bar Association would say about a fraud conviction? Think Harvard would be interested in someone with a criminal record. You wouldn't. He stopped himself, but the damage was done. Even now, even caught red-handed, his first instinct was to calculate how this would affect his image. I wouldn't what? Turn in my own son? I shook my head. You're right, I wouldn't. But that doesn't make what you planned any less despicable. Michael buried his face in his hands. For a moment, he looked like the little boy I'd raised, the one who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares and tell me I was the strongest person in the world. But that boy was gone, had been gone for longer than I'd wanted to admit. I panicked, he said finally. When Emma told me about the baby, I couldn't think straight. Her family has all this money, and I knew they'd look at me like I was some kind of parasite. I needed to prove I was worth something. So you decided to rob your father. I decided to borrow from you. I was going to pay it back. With what money? You don't have a job. You're not going to law school. You're about to default on your existing loans. I counted off each point on my fingers. Exactly. How were you planning to pay me back? He didn't have an answer for that. Of course he didn't. Let me guess, I said. You figured once you had the money, you'd figure something out. Maybe Emma's dad would come through with that internship. Maybe some other opportunity would present itself. And if not, well, at least you'd have bought yourself some time. The accuracy of my assessment was written across his face. Do you have any idea what you are stealing? I asked quietly. That money represents 35 years of my life. Every overtime shift, every skipped vacation, every time I chose your needs over my own wants. It's not just money, Michael. It's my future. I know that. Do you? Do you really? I pulled out my phone and showed him my banking app. $127,000. You know what that means to a 63-year-old man who fixes air. Conditioners for a living? Michael stared at the screen. It means maybe I can retire by 70 instead of working until I drop dead. It means I might be able to afford the medicine I'll need when my back finally gives out from crawling around in attics for 40 years. It means I won't have to choose between groceries and utility bills when I'm too old to work. I put the phone away. That's what you were going to steal. My dignity. We sat in silence for several minutes. Outside, the late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. The restaurant felt like a bubble, separate from the real world where normal families had normal problems. What happens now? Michael asked, finally. I don't know. And I didn't for 35 years. I'd known exactly what my purpose was. Take care of Michael. Give him every opportunity I'd never had. Love him enough for both parents. But that purpose had been built on a lie. The son I'd sacrificed. Everything for didn't exist. Maybe he never had. Are you going to help us? His voice was small, childlike. With the baby, the question should have been easy to answer. He was my son. Emma was carrying my grandchild. He held family, no matter what. But something had broken between us that couldn't be fixed with money, trust, maybe, or respect, or the simple assumption that love was enough to bridge any gap. I'll think about it, I said finally. Dot, no. I stood up, leaving a $5 bill on the table for the coffee. You've said enough for one day. We both have. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. Michael was still sitting in the booth, staring at his hands, looking lost and young and utterly defeated. For what it's worth, I said, your mother would have been heartbroken. Not about the baby, she would have loved having a grandchild, but about what you've become, about the lies and the manipulation and the way you've treated the people who love you. I left him there and walked out into the parking lot, my hands shaking as I unlocked my truck. The drive home passed in a blur of familiar streets and unfamiliar thoughts. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd made a decision that would surprise everyone, including myself. I was going to give Michael the money. All of it, but not for the reasons he expected. I spent that night sitting in Sierra's garden, surrounded by the yellow roses Michael used to help me plant. The roses were in full bloom now, their petals soft in the moonlight, their fragrance heavy in the humid air. Sarah had always said flowers were like children, they needed love and patience and the right conditions to flourish. Too much attention could smother them, but too little could let them wither away. I've been thinking about that a lot since Denny's, about the difference between nurturing and enabling, between love and weakness. At dawn, I made 3 phone calls that would change everything. The first was to Jennifer Walsh at First National Bank. Mr. Patterson, I wasn't expecting to hear from you so early. I want to make a payment on Michael's loans, I said. The full amount. $80,000. There was a pause. Sir, that's wonderful. I'll need to process some paperwork, but we can have this cleared by close of business today. Good. And Jennifer, I want documentation of everything. Every payment I'm making, every loan I'm covering, official bank records. Of course, may I ask why? Let's just say I want everything on the record. The second call was to Emma. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with worry. Mr. Patterson, is everything okay? Michael came home yesterday and he looked awful. We had a difficult conversation, I said. But that's not why I'm calling. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay? Does your family know about the baby? The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, quietly, no, we haven't told them yet. What about Michael's financial situation? Do they know about the debt? They know he's not wealthy. But double quotes. She trailed off. But they don't know he's drowning. Michael says it's temporary. That once he starts law school, Emma, I interrupted her gently. Michael isn't going to law school. He never got accepted to Northwestern. The sharp intake of breath told me she hadn't known. My son had been lying to everyone, even the woman carrying his child. That's not possible, she whispered. He showed me the acceptance letter. He showed you a fake. I checked Northwestern's enrollment database. He's not listed. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of her crying, soft, heartbroken sobs that made my chest ache. Emma, I need you to listen to me. Your family's going to find out about everything eventually as a baby. The debt, the lies. When they do, you're going to need someone on your side who knows the truth. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to meet with your parents today, Mr. Patterson. I don't think that's a good idea. My father. He's not exactly understanding about these kinds of situations. Trust me, I said. This is the right thing to do. The third call was the hardest. Michael answered on the second ring, his voice hoarse. Dad, look, about yesterday. Michael, I want you to listen carefully. I'm going to transfer $80,000 into your account this morning. Every penny of your student debt. The silence was so complete I could hear his breathing. Dad, I thank you. I know I don't deserve. You're right. You don't deserve it. But that's not why I'm doing it. What do you mean? I'm doing it because in 3 hours you're going to sit down with Emma's parents and tell them the truth. All of it. The pregnancy, the debt, the lies about law school, everything. What? No. Dad, you don't understand. Her father will destroy me. You've already destroyed yourself, son. I'm just making sure everyone else knows it. You can't do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm doing something for you. There's a difference. I could hear him breathing heavily, probably pacing around his expensive apartment that he couldn't afford. If you don't show up, I continued, I'll call Emma's father myself and tell him everything I know, including the fact that you were planning to defraud your own father to cover your mistakes. You're bluffing. Try me. The line went dead. At 11 o'clock that morning, I pulled into the circular driveway of the Hendricks estate. Emma's family home was everything I'd expected from the Instagram photos, and Mora's sprawling colonial mansion with perfectly manicured grounds and the kind of understated elegance that screamed old money. My truck looked like a rust bucket next to the BMW and Mercedes parked in the driveway. Emma met me at the front door, her eyes red from crying. She was showing now, just barely, a small curb that would be obvious to anyone who knew what to look for. They're in the living room, she said quietly. Michael's not here yet. He'll come. She led me through a foyer that was bigger than my entire kitchen, past oil paintings and antique furniture that probably cost more than I made in a year. The living room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a garden that looked like something from a magazine. Robert Hendricks stood when I entered, extending his hand with the practiced politeness of a man accustomed to dealing with all kinds of people. He was tall, silver-haired, wearing a golf shirt that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. Mr. Patterson, Emma said, you wanted to speak with us? I did. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Margaret Hendricks remained seated on a cream-colored sofa, her smile polite but distant. She was younger than her husband, impeccably dressed even for a casual Saturday morning meeting. Please, sit down, Robert said, gesturing to a chair across from them. Emma said this was about Michael. In a way, I looked at Emma, who was perched on the edge of a chair like she might bolt at any moment. But it's really about honesty. Before anyone could respond, the doorbell rang. Emma jumped up to answer it, returning a moment later with Michael trailing behind her. He looked like he hadn't slept, his clothes wrinkled, his hair Michael, Margaret said with genuine warmth. What a lovely surprise. Michael managed a weak smile, shooting me a look that could have melted steel. Mr. and Mrs. Hendricks, thank you for having me. Please, sit down, Robert said. Your father was just about to tell us something about honesty. Michael sat next to Emma, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out what I was planning, how much damage I was about to do. Mr. and Mrs. Hendricks, I began, I asked to meet with you because I believe you have the right to know what's happening with your daughter and my son. Dad, please, Michael started. Let me finish. I turned back to the Hendricks. Emma is pregnant. 4 months. Margaret's face went pale. Robert's expression didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten. She's also in love with a young man who's been lying to everyone, including her, about virtually every aspect of his life. Mr. Patterson, Robert said carefully, perhaps we should. Michael isn't going to law school, I continued. He was never accepted to Northwestern. He's $80,000 in debt, 3 months behind on his loan payments, and as of this morning, unemployed with no prospects. The silence in the room was deafening. Margaret looked like she might faint. Robert's politician's smile had vanished entirely. "Furthermore," I said, looking directly at Michael, "until this morning, he was planning to defraud me out of my retirement savings to cover his debts." "That's not true," Michael said desperately. Dad, you're making it sound worse than it is." "Am I?" "I pulled out my phone and showed them the Instagram post about trust fund friends. This was posted the same week he called me crying about his student debt." Margaret looked at the photo, then at her daughter, then at Michael. "Emma," she said quietly, "is this true?" Emma's face was streaked with tears. "I didn't know about most of it. The law school, the debt. He told me he was handling everything. He was handling it by planning to steal from his father," I said bluntly. "Robert Hendricks was a businessman. I could see him processing the information, calculating the implications. When he spoke, his voice was deadly calm. "Michael, I think you should leave. Mr. Hendricks, please, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain." Robert stood up, his full height imposing in the elegant room. "You lied to my daughter. You lied about your prospects, your education, your character. You've gotten her pregnant and then let her face this situation alone while you spun fantasies about your future." "I love Emma," Michael said desperately. "I made mistakes, but I love her." "Love?" Margaret's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "You called this love? Lying to her for months, planning to steal from your own father." Michael looked around the room like a trapped animal, his eyes finally landing on me. "Why are you doing this to me?" I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 63 years. "Because someone needs to teach you that actions have consequences, that you can't lie and cheat and manipulate your way through life without eventually facing the truth. But you paid off my loans. You said I paid them off so you'd have a clean slate. So when you walk out of here, and you will walk out of here, won't have that debt hanging over your head." I moved toward the door. "What you do with that gift is up to you." "Dad, wait." But I was already leaving, walking back through the foyer with its expensive artwork and polished floors. Behind me, I could hear voices rising, Robert Hendricks laying down the law, Emma crying, Michael trying desperately to salvage something from the wreckage of his lies. I didn't look back. In my truck, driving away from the mansion, and back toward my small house with its modest rooms and practical furniture, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. But the real surprise was waiting for me at home. The first thing I saw when I pulled into my driveway was Emma's white Honda Civic parked next to my mailbox. She was sitting on my front porch steps, her head in her hands, a small suitcase beside her. When she heard my truck door slam, she looked up and I could see she'd been crying for a while. "I didn't know where else to go," she said as I approached. I sat down beside her on the concrete steps, the same steps where Michael used to sit as a boy, waiting for me to come home from work. The irony wasn't lost on me. What happened after I left? My father told Michael to leave and never contact our family again. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tremor underneath. My mother, she said terrible things about me, about my judgment, about how I'd embarrassed the family and you. I told them they were right about Michael, but wrong about me. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I told them I wasn't going to abort my baby just to preserve the reputation. That took courage. It took desperation. She laughed bitterly. You know what my mother said. She said if I was determined to ruin my life, I should at least do it quietly, preferably somewhere far away from their social circle. I studied her profile. Pretty, but with something stronger underneath than I'd given her credit for. "So you left." I packed a bag and walked out. My father said if I left, I shouldn't bother coming back. She looked at me then, her eyes red but clear. I chose to leave. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the late afternoon shadows stretch across my small yard. A neighbor's dog barked somewhere down the street. Normal sounds from a normal neighborhood where people worked for what they had and didn't apologize for it. "Why did you come here?" I asked. "Because you're the only adult in this whole mess who told the truth, even when it hurt." She touched her stomach protectively. "This baby is going to need people in its life who understand the difference between right and wrong." "What about Michael?" "Michael made his choice. He could have stood up to my parents, could have admitted his mistakes and tried to make things right. Instead, he blamed everyone else. You, me, the situation. He said you'd ruined his life by exposing him." That sounded like my son. Even now, even after everything, he couldn't take responsibility for his own actions. "Where will you go?" "I don't know yet. I have some money saved up. Enough for a few months. I'll figure something out." She straightened her shoulders. "I'm stronger than everyone thinks I am." I believed her. There was something in her posture, in the way she'd chosen truth over comfort. That reminded me of Sarah. My wife had been young when we got married, pregnant with Michael, abandoned by her own family who thought she was marrying beneath her station. But she'd never regretted choosing love over luxury. "I have a proposition for you," I said slowly. Emma looked at me curiously. "The house next door has been empty for 6 months. Old Missy Chun moved to Florida to live with her daughter. It's a renta, now 2 bedrooms. Small but clean. The landlord, a customer of mine." I could put in a word. "Mr. Patterson, I can't afford much. It's $500 a month, and I know the landlord needs someone reliable to keep an eye on the place." She stared at me. "Why would you do that?" "Because that baby is my grandchild. Because you showed more character in one afternoon than my son has shown in years. And because... ... I paused, thinking about Sarah, about the yellow roses, about all the dreams I'd built around a son who'd never really existed. Because sometimes family isn't about blood. Sometimes it's about choosing the people who choose to do right." Emma started crying again, but these were different tears. Relief, maybe, or hope. "There's more," I continued. "I know you'll need work. Mrs. Rodriguez's granddaughter runs a non-profit that helps teenage mothers finish their education. They need someone with your organizational skills, someone who understands what it's like to face an unexpected pregnancy. It doesn't pay much, but it's honest work with people who respect you for who you are, not judge you for your circumstances. You've thought this all through." I had a long drive home. She wiped her eyes, then looked at me with something that might have been wonder. "You're offering me a job and a place to live, even though your son and I, especially because of that." I stood up, my knees creaking slightly. "Emma, I spent 35 years loving a son who took that love for granted. I'd rather spend whatever time I have left loving a grandchild who might actually appreciate it. What if Michael tries to reconcile? What if he wants to be part of the baby's life? Then he'll have to earn that right, the way any man should." I extended my hand to help her up. "Come on! Let me show you the house next door." We walked across my small yard to Mrs. Chun's former home. I had a spare key from when I used to check on her water heater. The house was modest but clean, with hardwood floors and big windows that let in plenty of light. "The nursery could go here," I said, opening the door to the smaller bedroom. Mrs. Chun used it as a sewing room. There's good natural light, and it's quiet. Emma stood in the doorway, one hand on her stomach, and I could see her imagining it a crib by the window, a rocking chair in the corner, all the simple necessities of new life. "Mr. Patterson," she said quietly, "I need you to know something." I loved Michael. I really did. But I never loved the person he was becoming. I know exactly what you mean. And I need you to know that if I do this, if I take your help, it's not charity. I'll pay my rent. I'll work hard. I'll be a good neighbor. I won't let you down. I never thought you would. We walked back to my house as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Sarah would have loved. Emma retrieved her suitcase from my porch, and I helped her carry it next door. One more thing, I said as she unlocked her new front door. The baby, when it's born, I'd like to be involved. Not as a replacement for Michael, but as a grandfather who actually shows up. She smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from her all day. I'd like that too. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and my laptop, looking at my bank balance. $80,000 lighter. But somehow I felt richer than I had in years. Through my window, I could see the light on in Emma's kitchen as she unpacked her few belongings. My phone rang Michael's number. I let it go to voicemail. 3 months later, Emma was showing enough that the women at the nonprofit had started a quiet betting pool about the due date. She'd thrown herself into the work with the kind of passion I recognized the determination of someone who'd found their purpose. Michael had called 17 more times. I'd answered exactly once when he'd called to tell me Emma had filed for child support. I'd congratulated him on finally being held accountable for something. She can't keep my child from me, he'd said. She's not keeping the child from you, I'd replied. She's keeping the child from who you've chosen to be. If you want to change that, you know what you need to do. He'd hung up. Now, sitting in my truck outside the courthouse where Emma had just established paternity and child support, I watched my son walk down the courthouse steps with shoulders slumped in defeat. He'd aged years in months. The boyish charm was gone, replaced by something harder and more desperate. He saw me and stopped. For a moment, we just looked at each other across the parking lot. Two men who shared blood but not much else anymore. Then he walked away, and I let him go. Emma emerged from the courthouse with her lawyer, her hand resting on her now prominent belly. When she saw me, she waved, her face bright with relief and determination. How did it go? I asked when she reached my truck. 18 years of child support. And he has to take parenting classes if he wants visitation rights. She climbed into the passenger seat. The judge was not impressed with his employment history, or lack thereof. The lawyer said, Michael's been working part-time at a call center, living in a studio apartment on the other side of town. She buckled her seatbelt carefully. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I remembered he had choices. He always had choices. I started the truck, and we drove home to our quiet neighborhood where people valued honesty over appearances, where a grandchild would grow up understanding that love wasn't about what you could buy, but about what you were willing to sacrifice. That night, as I watered Sarah's yellow roses in the fading light, I thought about the conversation I'd had with Michael in Denny's, about the question he'd asked. What happens now? Now, I had my answer. Sometimes love means letting go. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to face the consequences of their choices. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, life gives you a second chance to love someone who actually deserves it. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Baby's kicking. I think he or she approves of the paint color for the nursery. I smiled, typing back. As I put the phone away and headed inside, I wondered if Michael would ever understand what he'd lost. Not just the money, not just his family support, but the chance to be part of something real, something built on truth instead of lies. Maybe someday he'd figure it out. Maybe he'd do the work to become the man his child deserved, but that was his choice to make. and for the first time in years, I was at peace with that. What would you have done in my place?